Just a short presentation on the work that the Trust has done at Castle Sinclair, and I've entitled it History or Just a Myth. Castle Sinclair Gurnigo, that's our logo, that's it from the seaside as you come in. Okay, for those that don't know it, it's sitting just to the north of Wick, and we're up here at Johnny Roads. What is the history? Look up any history book, and we have two castles, Castle Sinclair and Castle Gurnigo. It was destroyed by cannon. It was an average tower house, and it was a strong defensive place. So let's take Castle Gurnigo, the tower house. When was it built? Well, we were granted the title of Earls of Caithness in 1455. There was a charter to Jan de Groot to run the ferry to Orkney signed in Gurnigo in 1496. Ergo, it was built between those two dates, between 1746 and 1476 and 1496. And I think today is the anniversary of the charter being signed to Jan de Groot. So that's that building. This building was known as Castle Sinclair. And the first record of it was the Reverend John Brand in 1701, who said there was a lintel of a window in Castle Sinclair, 1607, when the castle was either built or least repaired. And then, by 1760, that had been firmed up that it actually was built for an elder son. That was Bishop Pocock, so in 59 years history change. That's what I call Niven Sinclair history. You have an assumption, it becomes a fact, it becomes gospel. It was destroyed in cannon, even in the year 2000, a mere 15 years ago. Spratt was writing in 1690, he got the date wrong. George Sinclair Keys again besieged, he never besieged it. Gurnigo Sinclair Castle, this time with heavy cannon, ironically destroying its inheritance. That is the history that John and I and John's Rob Enrico have lived with for 300 years. And why is it an average tower house? Well, anything in Scotland was below par. Samuel Johnson wrote that Highlanders are strangers to the language and the manners and the advantages and wants of the people, those like who they will model and whose evils they would remedy. So we were condemned by the English, it had to be average. But you start to look at things. Let's look at Castle Sinclair. Don't forget 1607 is your start date. But the archaeologists said, we'll have a look at these 4 holes here in the wall. Yeah? And we started digging it out. And this is from the inside looking out to the sea. And we found a fireplace. We found a window. This was ground level, so we dug down about 8 feet at this stage. But in the corner here, we found a lavatory, a garderobe on the outside wall. Straight drop out, very environmentally friendly, just gets recycled in the sea. And this is another one we found in the castle with a wooden, and all you've got to do is put the wooden seat on that, and there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
There they went.
Quite literally.
And they all have a place for the John O'Groat Journal, so you can sit there and read the newspaper. Problem. Built in 1607, nobody built guardrobes after 1500. Hang on, we got a problem here. Then you've got to look at the wall of the chimney stack at what was known as Castle Sinclair. Just draw your attention to the mortar there and here. And when we repointed it, we had to repoint in the original mortar, as close to the original mortar as possible. Here you have seashell mortar. Here you have mud mortar. 2 totally different styles of building, 200 years apart. Another problem. They didn't build in mud mortar after about 1550, yet this is supposed to be 1607. But they did build in 1607 in seashell mortar. And then there's a window seat in Castle Sinclair, which we exposed. You can't have a big window seat in a 1400s castle, can you? There's some children. We did one of the many children's days we've done. They're sitting on the window seat. But you can't have a window seat in an old castle. Or can't you? Here is the window seat at Carisbrooke Castle, dated at 1260. So, high status, window seat, lovely window, same size as the one at Gernigo, but that's not very defensive. Facing west, right where the enemy can attack, you have this glorious example. So the doubters who said it couldn't be that date, here was another little bit of history and fact that was changed. And then we look at this mound here, which we were excavating. And lo and behold, we suddenly have a 1600s oven. Circular beehive oven. Entrance to the oven there. You'll see that on Tuesday. So what are we ending up with? We're ending up with a complete mixture of 1400s, 1500s and 1600s. And thereby hangs the tale. This is an aerial view of part of the castle, and nobody knew what it was except for the archaeologists told us what it was, and when we excavated it, it was a lovely square staircase. Historic Scotland said, you don't get square staircases in the north of Scotland. Nobody was that grand. Weren't they? Heck, the Sinclairs were. We were that grand. Imagine, most of you have never seen a staircase in your life. The only staircase you might have seen would have been a circular tower staircase. You here have a totally undefendable square staircase that two people can go up side by side. You cannot defend that staircase. So the myths are all now getting exploded and we have to start again from scratch. Look at that. Beautifully made. And the great thing was that the rubble on top of it preserved it. And some of these stretch right the way across. That is Cape the Slate. I've been talking about that in the coach. We're looking at this mound up here. Here is the mound that we decided that we wanted to get rid of. We got rid of what was underneath it. The most beautiful red Caithness sandstone floor. This is not 1400s quality. This is top-notch 1600 quality. This is the floor of the private chapel of the Earl of Caithness in 1670. We designed our castles very much like Edward I had done in Wales. The chapel was right above the archway. If you attack the archway, you attack the chapel, you attack God, you don't attack. Wonderful. But this is high status, this is not defence, this is high quality living. We are now in a country house, not a castle. This is I've forgotten the word of it.
Boss.
Keystone in the vaulted roof. It's got 4 sides, so there were 4 vaults that came up and met at the top, and the whole thing, that you who know masonry, is held by the keystone. This is the keystone with a crest on, the Sinclair cock, but I'd never seen one with the wings stretched out before. And this, again, was typical of what people were doing in the 1600s. They were building these keystones, and they were either putting their crest on it, their initial, or Roman gods on it. You go to any decent big house in England, you'll see them. There is the cock with the wings spread out. I took that to Lord Lyon. It wasn't registered, so we registered it as one of the Sinclair crests. And that's what it would have looked like, hanging from the ceiling and the vaults going up to it. Hugely impressive. Go in there, when we entertained the guns to dinner, they would have been overawed. They would have signed any bit of paper to get out alive. And here it is on a Fairburn crest. That's the only drawing I've ever seen of it. And we also, in our excavation, discovered the leaded light of the windows in the new bit of what we knew as Castle Sinclair, and we got the design so we could have this beautiful leaded light window. Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, I was there with the Italians. Penny and I were going around, and I said, photograph it, it's the same as Sinclair Gerdigo. So Pen had it on her iPad, and this is it. And again, if you have this high quality status palazzo in Florence, you've got it in the north of Scotland. The news travelled, we wanted the best and only the best would do us. So having demolished the history of Castle Sinclair, let's have a look at Gernigo. Don't forget this was built between 1476 and 1496. And the first thing I want you to look at is this area here. You can see it's got pug holes here, it's got corbels below and above, and more potlugs there. It's got this and a doorway here. And people called it a brettash. A brettash is a sort of structure on the front of a castle that you can go in and you look at the enemy. It's just a piece of wood with a little balcony, and you can spy out to sea.
Yes.
Yep. But it's not. It's a proper long gallery. And a long gallery is a long narrow room, have a high ceiling. It's on the upper floor of a great height. It has to have a chimney. Let's go back, B, please. It stretches the whole length of the building. It has a door. It has a fireplace. It's got a high ceiling. It was totally enclosed. That is a proper long gallery. The news came up from England. Henry VIII is building long galleries at Hampton Court Palace. Oh yeah? How does it look like? You're halfway up building your new tower house. You've got to incorporate it somehow. The only place you can put it is on the side of the building. Yep, and again. Just stopping there, how do I know that's a fireplace? Look at the chimney, straight above it. We flew over it in a helicopter, and I said, photograph, photograph, because that proves, and they had to alter the design of the tower house as they were rebuilding it in order to accommodate the chimney there. Yep.
It's just thinking about it, Dad.
Okay, let it think. Here is a sort of long gallery at Carcassonne that Penny and I saw. You can see the structure. Ours would have had windows across the front, but it gives you an idea of what it would have looked like. The dormer windows. These are the dormer windows. They're built into the part into the roof of the building. And when you get dormer windows like that, you know you're talking 1500s, mid-1500s. But hang on, the castle's built in 1470s because they signed the charter to Jan de Groot. So again, it's starting to make one reassess one's whole history of the castle and say, okay, it's a mixture of everything. We're looking now at the curtain wall. This is this wall here, where they had, and this had hagbard gun loops in it. And the reason I'm showing you this is that the tower house is built right into the middle of a hagbard gun loop, which meant that the curtain wall was there before the tower was there. And that those keystones there are the old tower, and when they revamped the tower, they pushed it out. And here is the curtain wall. There's a hagbard gun loop. They're at regular intervals, and if you put it right, and we'll try and see it on Tuesday, there is another hagbard gun loop right there. So the castle is not 1400s, is it? It's got to be 1500s, the tower house. Until you look at this photograph again. Here's your oven. look at that. That's the next layer below that. There's your 1600s, but there was a barbican, which is your outer defence, to the old tower house. So what we now know is that there was a tower house there. It was knocked down in the early 1500s, and the new one was built with all the modern designs, the dormer windows, the long gallery. But underground was the final bit of evidence to point out the fact that there was something there before. And here in the outer barbican, on the west of the castle, is our final confirmation. You have 3 areas of building. Here is your 1400 wall. So the castle would have been the same size as it is today, and there would have been a barbican on the landward side. This is the bit we're going to acquire. This land is all owned by Andrew Morgan, so this is the bit that's going to come into the trust as part of the exchange up to this wall. So you've got the 1400s barbican. On top of it, you have cut here the 1600s new pathway. Things were getting easier, things were getting more high class. We were now country house, high quality living. So you have a lovely path with an edge here that you can see, and then you have the 1800s, 1900s agricultural improvements. And the people that took the stone from there to make this also took the stone from there to make that. We don't know the full extent of it, but it again is an example, or confirms, that the castle was altered by every generation, and as new techniques came along, they did nothing different to what we do. We put on dens for the children, we put on granny flats, we put in triple gazing. That wasn't how your house was probably built to begin with. No different in the old days. They did exactly what we're doing now. And this started now to prove that it was the whole castle gradually evolved. How did we learn about this? Well, we did documents. This is a fairly easy document to read for some people, but nobody had found the Sinclair family documents until the archaeologists went to the National Archives in Edinburgh and put 2 and 2 together and made 4. Everybody had assumed that the Sinclair documents would have been filed under Sinclair. But of course that they weren't. You've got to go back to 1680, the Battle of Ultimarloch, when John Campbell of Glenorchy came up here, claimed the land and the castle, also claimed the title for 3 years. He kept the land and the castle. He kept the property inside it, which was all our papers. So the old family papers were filed under Campbell, not under Sinclair. And we found the spellings of Girnigo. For an amateur like me, if it wasn't Girnigo, Girnigoe, it wasn't the castle. Well, it could have been any one of those spellings. There are 7 different spellings in 50 years of a document, so it depends who wrote it. The scribe was told to write, and they did it phonetically, exactly the same way when we first landed in America. There was somebody there at Ellis Island, and you said, Sinclair. Well, it came S-T-C-L-I, S-I-N-K-L-A-I-R-E. However he heard it, he had to write it down quickly, and that is why you get so many different spellings of Sinclair. Exactly the same, you get different spellings of Girnigo. Why was it Sinclair, why was it Girnigo? Well, it was all Girnigo Castle until I was waiting in the House of Lords for a division, and I found the old Acts of Parliament of Scotland in the House of Lords library. So immediately I went to the index and started looking for Sinclair and Caithness, and I found it. Our sovereign lord and the States of Parliament, presently convened for certain causes and considerations, has thought it might and expedient to alter and change the name of the castle of Girnigo in Caithness, and statutes and ordinances that in all time coming the said castle shall be called Castle Sinclair. So it should be Castle Sinclair, But the locals up in Wick take a long time to change their mind. And they refer to it as Gernigo. And who was this wretched earl that wanted to change the name of the local castle? They called it Gernigo, so when the Reverend John Brand came up, practically 100 years later, some of the locals were saying Sinclair, some of the locals were saying Gernigo. You had one bit there, with a moat down the middle, ergo, 2 castles. And here, in 1657, I told you that Cromwell occupied the castle, Castle Sinclair, Sinclair Castle, one company and one company of men, and horse. It was the most important castle for Cromwell in the north of Scotland. It's always written in the history books that Archaeological was more important. It wasn't. Archaeological doesn't rate on this list. This list was an allowance for fire and candle for the governors of the establishments of these castles, and they're all the top castles in Caithness that Cromwell occupied. I want to show you this slide. Some of you think of archaeology as running around with a trowel and a toothbrush. That's what you see on television. It's hard labour and rubble clearing. We were digging out this part of the castle, and we got down to ground level, and we saw the results of Cromwell's occupation. This room, which had once been a storeroom, had been divided into 3 chambers. There's a definite line there, there's a definite line there, and there's this bit at the end. This was one of the lookout spots. It would have guarded the bridge over the moat, and we found a tremendous amount of clay pipes here. They were smoking tobacco, and in those days the clay pipes were made in the local area, so you could always tell where the clay pipes came from. Did they come from Caithness? No. Cromwell didn't trust us. They were London, Amsterdam and Southampton. What did we find when we were doing our excavation? We found a Mesolithic bead about 5000 BC. That site has been inhabited for years and years and years, and we are just trustees of it for the 60, 70, 80 years that we live on this land. We found a Neolithic arrowhead, beautiful arrowhead, that's up at Noss Head. And we found Roman coins. We know that the Romans came round here. They made a peace treaty with the princes in Orkney so that the Romans could sail their ships through the Pentland Firth without being attacked. So each little bit of history, and we find an early 1600s knife. This was found in the chapel with that lovely red sandstone floor. We found the chapel. That part of the castle was much more looted and vandalised than the Tower House, and the reason for that was the 2 moats. The inner moat, when the castle was uninhabited, they couldn't get access to the inner part of the castle. The great destroyer of the castle is man. Why cut a stone when you can go and rob it off your neighbour that's got an empty ruin sitting at the bottom of the hill? Most of that stone at the castle was used in the building up at Noss Farm. Andrew Morgan took down an old cow shed about 4 years ago, and the roof tiles were the most beautifully carved red sandstone roof tiles. I wonder where they came from. So this is what we now think of the castle. This is the sea, there's the inner moat, there's the outer moat. We think this bit, which we haven't excavated yet, is pre-1500, probably 1200s. The 1500 bits are in red, so you can see the Tower House, the new Tower House, is in blue, and then the later period, 1560 to 1650, is the red, so the Tower House. So what we thought was the old bit, which was that, in fact, is more recent than most of that. So let's look at some pictures now. Very much a bit of artistic license, but I think it gives you a good idea. we had a Norse fortalice with a barbican at the front, not shown here, a tower house, a curtain wall, and outbuildings. Perfect defensive situation. You've got a good place for the boats. You've got a cliff on the other side. Total defence and security. The Sinclairs acquired land up here through the marriage to the last Norse heiress in 1357. So this was one of our castles. We also know that his son, William's son, was created first Jarl of Orkney and built Kirkwall Castle. Well, if you own a castle in Kirkwall and you've got the land here, you control the Pentland Fir, you are powerful, you are rich. So it was absolutely natural that 100 years later, when we had to give up the title of Earl of Orkney and our castle at Kirkwall, this became base in the north of Scotland. But that wasn't big enough for him. So all he did was dig out an extension to the moat, use the stone for building the castle, and you therefore have your 1400s base, the old bit, and still fairly defensive. You've got the first of the barbican now being shown here. Then you come grand to the 1600s. You're no longer a castle. You're a country house. You've knocked down that old tower. You've built this fabulous new tower and extended it. You've changed the buildings at the back. You've chopped off the tower at the front and you've put in a new banqueting house and chamber, a chapel, a new study above, oriel windows with new fenestration. What's that glass called? Leaded glass. Terrific alteration here. And you would have come across the drawbridge into this. It's a sort of place that Trump would build or Beckham would build now. It sang and it danced in a way that very few other castles or properties would have done in its time. And then we come to its destruction. Well, there's always been this thing that it was destroyed by cannon because this part is so ruined. Not a bit of it. We have now found written evidence that George Sinclair of Keys in January 1680 put up notes in the marketplace, the Mercat Cross, where all the messages were, telling all the clan to come and knock down Sinclair Gernigo and knock down Thurso East, because they were the two big homes up here. Well, the boys came out with their pickaxes and they got to work. You take out the main roof timbers of a house and you push the walls out, and you haven't got a castle anymore. That's what happened. We have not found trace of a cannonball anywhere, but we have found trace of man's destruction, because in the moat here you can find pretty well the entirety of that wall flat in the grass. We'll look at that, the big windows. Look at that for a size. That's not a defendable castle. This is high quality living. So that fell into the moat. Campbell very sensibly rebuilt Thurso East, or patched it up, and continued to live there. And thankfully it was John's family who acquired it from Campbell, and you saw it at lunchtime today.
What's left?
So this is what we think it looked like. This is what it is today. So you've got the tower house, you've got this bit. I talked about the trust and its future, and phase 2. That is phase 2. That is the exciting bit. That's going to show us all the Norse foundations and date the building. It's even been suggested that there was a broch here, which takes us back to BC. So there's a huge amount of work for the trust still to do. There's a tremendous challenge ahead. And where we're so lucky and fortunate is that it was actually destroyed in 1680, because since then it's been in a time warp. Man has robbed some stone, yeah, okay, they've done that. But you cannot find another Middle Age Renaissance castle untouched in the north of Scotland, anywhere in Scotland. That's why this castle is the only castle in Scotland to be listed by the World Monument Fund in New York. We know that it was built mid-1400s, altered by every generation, largest castle in the north of Scotland, unique, never attacked by cannon, and the only one listed. And there is the future, the past, the present, and the hope for the next generation.
Well done.
Just one thing to point out, Ian and I couldn't resist putting up a flagpole and flying the engraved cross. That is actually a true photograph taken by the archaeologists coming home from work one evening.
Malcolm, have you published this? Have you written this down, what you told us today?
No, I haven't. It's not up to me, it's up to the archaeologists. I have commissioned the archaeologists to start work on it. Historic Scotland are pressing us to do it. We have delayed because we said we were part of a continuous process and we didn't want to publish anything until we got from A to Z. We got to about M, and Historic Scotland have said you've got to publish. So Jonathan Clark is working on it at the moment. It will come out. It will be probably his professorship. It's going to be an extraordinary tome of work, but he wants to write chapter 2.
Just record what you told us today.
It records all of that, but in proper archaeological detail, with photographs, plans, the lot. Historical references. Alice.
Who will pay for this future digging then?
Well, we were thinking that the Alice Miller Trust Fund was going to I will go anywhere to get money. As you know, I've been round America, I've driven up and down the Appalachian Mountains calling on Sinclairs. I've lost heart a little bit at the moment. I think it's up to the next generation to do it. The old girl has stood there for 300 years. It's now safe for a bit longer. If we don't do it tomorrow, we can do it the next day, but all donations welcome.
Christmas is coming. Put her on your Christmas list.
Have you finished, Dad?
Yes?
Dad, on behalf of myself, obviously your son, on behalf of the entire clan, thank you for saving it, because where it was 15 years ago is something totally different. You have rewritten history, you've proven that today.
You're
Dad,
right on.
thank you.
Well said.